And real quick guys, before we get to my review of Kena Bridge of Spirits, make sure to check out the giveaway on the channel that we're doing for the black PS5 digital plates courtesy of Nexigo. Go check out that giveaway, and definitely in that description of that video, definitely hit up Nexigo on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, all their social media platforms, and of course make sure to comment below and like on that giveaway video why you want the PS5 digital edition black plates. On to the review. While I've personally never made a game before, I've played a lot of them before over the years and have come to understand that no matter the size or scale of a development team, making games is no easy task. That notion kept creeping up as I played through Ember Lab's debut game, Kena Bridge of Spirits on the PlayStation 5. Although the game's moment-to-moment gameplay wasn't shown off for some time leading up to release, its visuals and animation work caught my eye upon first impression, making it an easy decision to review the game when I was offered a code by Ember Lab. With a major season of games on the horizon with the likes of Metroid, Far Cry, and Halo, after spending my time with Kena Bridge of Spirits, I was left blown away at what the developers were able to do in spite of mainly being an animation studio prior to this game. For $40, Kena Bridge of Spirits offers an endearing roster of characters, lush and colorful environments, all in a refreshingly manageable runtime in comparison to other modern games. While the gameplay can feel a bit undercooked at times, the game shines in a ton of different ways, making Kena Bridge of Spirits absolutely worth your time. One of the most consistent praises I've seen for Kena Bridge of Spirits stems from the game's visuals, animations, sound, and overall design that exercises a level of refinement along with calling back to a nostalgic era for games as a whole. After beating the game, I easily agree with these praises. The game is drop dead gorgeous. Punchy, vibrant colors flood various regions of the game, from green villages, blue scenic waterways, and even dark contrasty caves. The game's color is emphasized when Kena heals an environment and you get to see firsthand the transition from death to life with the colors coming in. It never gets old. From corner to corner, it becomes clear that Ember Lab sought to make a game that wasn't big for the sake of being big, but a smaller scale with the design being its strength. Kena Bridge of Spirits often gets compared to a PS2 game as a compliment, and it's easy to see why. The game features long, winding corridors with much of the view being obstructed by rocks or trees. It makes it feel smaller in spite of the game's multiple biomes and regions. I imagine it was designed in this way for technical limitations to take into account the PS4 hardware, but for me, I really think it works out for the game overall. Aside from that, the game's music and animations are of a top quality as well, with beautiful orchestral music swelling during boss fights to the animation work in cutscenes quite literally looking like a Pixar movie. While I believe 2021's Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart looked more like a Pixar movie, Kena Bridge of Spirits definitely gives it a run for its money, on top of the fact that it's the premier game for the studio. It's also no surprise the cutscenes and animations look so well given Ember Lab's previous work in animation, working with the likes of MLB and the Coca-Cola Company. Above all else, looking at Kena Bridge of Spirits from all these aspects makes it shine immensely bright, while also making the other parts of the game shine a little less in some cases we'll get to later on in the review. However, before we get to that, let's touch a little bit on the game's story, where you play as Kena, a spirit guide set out to an abandoned village in search of the mountain shrine. In order to reach the mountain shrine though, Kena must abide by her duty as a spirit guide to help the trapped souls of the village understand what's keeping them in the physical realm and help them let go and transition to the spirit realm. The struggles of the trapped souls she'll encounter range from dealing with emotions of regret, responsibility, and frustration that all tie in together in neat ways. These encounters really provide the Pixar feel out of having a whimsical experience take a turn for an excruciating, relatable, slow, and somber moment that's sure to be a tearjerker. Along the way, Kena will befriend these tiny creatures called rots. They'll assist her in traversal, environmental puzzles, and even combat. The game's story as a whole is really endearing and something that I didn't think was necessarily incredible, but enjoyable all things considered. It hits on a lot of poignant points that tie directly to humanity, along with telling the tale of the village Kena so desperately wants to heal. It may not win any awards in terms terms of narrative, but I thought it offered a great backbone of themes that the game itself can flex on top of. Speaking of, Kena Bridge of Spirits begins to lose a bit of shine going into the gameplay and other aspects of the game itself. As a whole, combat doesn't feel super dialed down and refined in comparison to the game's visuals, sound, and design. Combat certainly doesn't feel bad, just a little shallow in comparison to other games of its genre. Kena can feel a little bit detached from her hits when engaging in combat, and you'll quickly discover all of her potential moves she can do relatively quickly in the game. Heavy attack, light attack, bow, and bombs are pretty much your main forms of offensive engagements, which can definitely feel a little bit repetitive in spite of the game's 9.5 hour how long to beat average. I feel it's also fair to take into account that the game's price point being $40 is far less than the current generation standard of $70 given that game's scale overall. Also, the fact that the game does have other abilities for combat that it rolls out to you via the skill tree and brought abilities. However, a similar fate still stands overall even with these two aspects. The game's skill tree is really limited and doesn't offer a ton, but it is still helpful given the scale of the game overall. Maxing out your skill tree is something that one can stumble upon doing without having to do too much thought as long as you're relatively thorough in gathering resources to purchase the abilities on the skill tree. A part of me really appreciated the game's smaller scale, as I recall the sheer overwhelming feeling of looking at Assassin's Creed Valhalla's skill tree that I felt I barely made a dent in after putting over 10 times the amount of time in comparison to Kena Bridge of Spirits. However, I do also feel like a bit of potential was untapped given how they were able to realize some of the different rot abilities. Essentially, Kena can take some of your normal attacks and combine them with the rot, allowing for a much stronger outcome that is properly measured by its limited number of uses via the rot action orbs. These abilities can range from the useful stun to distract enemies, rot hammer to create devastating area of effect damages, and the extremely useful rot infused arrow and bombs. A lot of them have extra attributes as well, with the rot infused bomb slowing down time when activated, allowing you to have a higher damage per second on bosses to get the jump on them quicker. They're all really cool abilities that offer interesting ways to tackle enemies and bosses. I just wish they spent a little more time fleshing these aspects out, but perhaps that's what sequels are for. Another side to Kena Bridge of Spirits is the exploration aspects of the game that I think offer a lot of carrots to seek for curious players, but not the best carrots when I take a step back and look at them. The way the game hides certain meditation spots to increase Kena's max health, rots to add to your collection, and new hats to put on your rots are clearly cleverly placed and peppered throughout the game very nicely. The only thing is that I don't think they're super rewarding at the end of the day, aside from the meditation spots and delivery mail that offers rewards in bulk. I felt that the game never really showed me how useful it would be to find more rots, but rather just easily gave me all the rots that I would need at a given time. I ended the game with around 70 rots, but I didn't really notice my attack's power and usefulness increasing with the amount of rots I had. Yes, there is a rot level tied to how many rots you acquire that does give you access to stronger shield health and quicker rot actions being recharged upon successful parries, but for some reason I really didn't feel that much more powerful after finding more rots. Ultimately, I feel like the amount of effort the game requires out of you to find rots in the environment, albeit they're incredibly fun to do, doesn't equate to fully feeling more powerful. Perhaps the limited amount of moves as a whole enhances that feeling I had, but it still persisted nonetheless. I also feel like the hats were a bit of a missed opportunity as well. It would have been neat to have attributes tied to the hats that you equip on the rots to enable them to behave differently. Maybe they stun enemies longer when you equip a specific hat on a certain majority of your rots party, or are able to engage healing plants faster to give you health quicker in combat due to a specific hat. But they're just strictly cosmetic, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, look at them, they're adorable. I just wish a little more thought was put into it, considering that the game has an unexpectedly wide variety of different hats that don't affect gameplay whatsoever. Kena Bridge of Spirits is not a perfect game in spite of how much I truly enjoyed the game itself upon completion, and it starts to really show when you look at the game's systems a little closer. Simple omissions were made, like not being able to place waypoints on your map to get from point A to point B. It's an incredibly minor thing, but having to pull up the map constantly to ensure I was going the right way wasn't exactly fun. Perhaps they wanted the feel of truly using landmarks to direct yourself as opposed to a literal waypoint marker, but at the end of the day, waypoints are a part of modern game design, and I would have loved to see it in the game, but it's not by any means a deal breaker. What is a deal breaker though is the parry. Since the writing of this review, the game has been patched multiple times to address the parry, and it's still still doesn't feel quite right. I've never seen a game's parry be so unanimously agreed upon that it's off and it isn't a reliable mechanic in the game, when it seems like it should have been, given that the developers cite Souls games as a direct inspiration. The timing on it was something I never grasped, and the actual execution of a successful parry triggers a scripted animation that throws off the flow of combat. Parrying should be something that feels consistent and has a quick effect. It truly doesn't have that, and it ended up being one of the most underutilized moves during my playthrough. A lot of the game's flaws from a mechanics level are on clear display during the game's bosses. A specific boss towards the end of the game relies very heavily on the parry, which made that particular boss pretty frustrating, but overall the bosses are very clever in terms of attack pattern and movesets. They're really engaging while not being excruciating. I've heard many people say that they're unexpectedly hard, but I couldn't disagree more, as I found them to be a really nice challenge that put your skills to the test. I also have to praise the game's end section, where the combat encounters really test you as a player, and it's incredibly rewarding. However, a big problem I think really does come from the fact that this is Ember Lab's first game, in which the game's combat can feel unfair due to it being generally rough around the edges. Some attacks, like the jump attack, feels like it should be dealing more damage in front of Kana's character model when it doesn't. A lot of times I felt like I dodged an attack visually but ended up rubber banding and still taking damage, and overall some of the moment-to-moment combat felt a little bit loose and not as tight as I'd like it to be. I reckon these are just due to the studio not ever making a game before, and while on the surface it sounds like I'm being really critical on Kena Bridge of Spirits, at the end of the day I'm left extremely impressed with it. I could honestly see Kena Bridge of Spirits being a lot of people's game of the year for 2021, and I don't say that lightly. This little game is a beautifully crafted journey from beginning to end that has beautiful moments, somber themes, and shares the hope and soul of a Pixar movie. Its characters offer clear reflections of a variety of human emotion and close in a world that screams to be explored. While its gameplay doesn't feel as expansive or tight, its boss fight design is really engaging and lays great set pieces that come at a pretty regular pace throughout the game's 10-hour runtime. Two prominent thoughts enter my mind upon completing the game: the fact that this game puts a lot of other developers' first game to shame, and that I cannot wait to see what Ember Lab does next as they build upon what they made with Kena Bridge of Spirits. Above all else, the potential that I've seen with the game is as clear as how gorgeous the overall experience is, and Ember Lab certainly left me wanting more. Whenever Ember Lab is ready to bring out their next game, I hope that they're able to truly realize the full potential of what they're capable of crafting, because they clearly have what it takes to elevate to the next level. If you own a PlayStation platform, Kena Bridge of Spirits is an enjoyable experience that certainly will leave you yearning for more. But down below, what do you guys think about Kena Bridge of Spirits? Did you like the review? Did you disagree with me on some points? Is there something that I did bring up that you noticed as you played through the game? Let me know those thoughts in the comments below. And make sure also, while you are down there, don't forget that description you can find links to our Discord, our Twitter, and an Anchor link. That way you can listen to our long form podcast, the Road to Podcast series, coming up in the very near future, with the latest installments being Road to Forbidden West, coming up in 2021. Definitely don't miss out on that. Like the video if you enjoyed it, as well as stay subscribed to PlayStation Source to keep up with the latest and greatest in PlayStation. Thank you all for watching, and as always, greatness awaits.